The archaeological station hung in the darkness like a metal insect, its sensors pointed toward the gray world below. Terminus 7 had been dead for millions of years. No atmosphere, no water, no life. Just rocks and ruins and strange markings that nobody understood. Dr. Keveth stood in the observation deck, his crystalline body reflecting the pale light from the dead planet. He had spent 40 years studying those markings. 40 years of careful analysis, mathematical modeling, and spectral examination. His conclusion matched every other scientist who had visited this place. The markings meant nothing. Random patterns, he said to the Mindari observer beside him. Erosion, perhaps, or the scratches of some primitive creature that lived here before the planet died. The Mindari, a being of pure telepathic energy contained in a shimmering field, pulsed with agreement. It had touched the stones with its mind and felt no intelligence, no purpose. Just empty rock-bearing empty marks. The Council has approved the mining operation, Kaveth continued. We will begin demolition in 2 weeks. The rare minerals below the surface are worth more than these meaningless ruins. Nobody disagreed. The Kelthusians, who lived for thousands of years and remembered the old days of the galaxy, had examined the site centuries ago. They found nothing. The Vexari, whose mathematical minds could calculate probability across 11 dimensions, found no pattern. The Mindari, who could read thoughts from dead stones, felt no ancient presence. After 300 years of study, the verdict was final. Terminus 7 was just another dead end in the galaxy's long history. Then the humans arrived. The transport ship was small and old, barely worth the name research vessel. It docked with the station on a Tuesday morning, and Kaveth watched with mild irritation as 4 humans floated through the airlock. They wore simple environment suits and carried equipment that looked ancient compared to Galactic Council technology. Dr. Kaveth, the lead human, extended a hand in that strange greeting ritual of theirs. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. Thank you for allowing us to study the ruins. Kaveth's translator converted his crystalline chime into words the humans could understand. You have 2 weeks, Dr. Chen. After that, the mining begins. I suggest you not waste your time, Sarah smiled. Humans did that when they were determined. We'll see what we can find. Her team was small. Marcus Webb, a linguist who specialized in dead languages. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a mathematician who studied pattern recognition. James Okonkwo, an engineer who seemed more interested in building things than studying ancient ruins. They were young by galactic standards. Humans had only joined the Galactic Council 200 years ago. Barely yesterday in the timeline of civilized space. Most species considered them impulsive, overly curious and prone to seeing patterns where none existed. Their brains had evolved to spot predators in shadows and see faces in clouds. Useful for survival on a death world perhaps, but not for serious scientific work. Kaveth assigned them the worst section of the ruins. A collapsed temple complex at the southern pole that had already been stripped of anything valuable. The other scientists had left it alone for the last century, considering it worthless. The humans could waste their 2 weeks there. Sarah stood on the surface of Terminus 7 3 hours later, staring at the ruins. The temple walls stretched before her, covered in those strange markings everyone called meaningless. Lines and curves and geometric shapes that seemed to dance across the stone in patterns that almost made sense, but never quite did. It's beautiful, Marcus said, his voice crackling through the suit radio. It's junk, came Kaveth's voice from the station above. We have analyzed every square meter. There is no language there. No message. Just random marks. Sarah walked closer, running her gloved hand over the stone. The markings were everywhere. On every surface, every wall, every broken piece of rubble. Whoever made them had covered this entire temple, maybe this entire planet, with these symbols. Random, she muttered. Sure doesn't look random to me. Yuki was already setting up scanning equipment, her face hidden behind her helmet's reflective visor. I'm running a pattern analysis. Basic stuff first. Looking for repetition, symmetry, mathematical sequences. James began assembling a drone network. I'll get us a 3-dimensional map of this whole area. Every marking captured in high resolution. Marcus knelt by a wall studying the symbols up close. These aren't just carved. They're layered. Look here. This mark is older than this one, which is older than this one. Like someone kept coming back over and over, writing new things on top of old things. For how long? Sarah asked. Marcus ran his analysis tool over the stone. The results made him pause. If these readings are right, millions of years, maybe tens of millions, someone kept writing on these walls for an impossibly long time. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold planet. The other species said they analyzed this. They did, Yuki called out. I'm reading their reports now. The Vexari looked for mathematical patterns using quantum computation. The Mindari tried to read psychic impressions. The Kelthusians studied the geological formation. They all used their own methods. And found nothing, Sarah finished. Because they were looking the wrong way, Yuki said. Her screen lit up with data. Sarah, come look at this. The pattern analysis showed something the other species had missed. The markings weren't random, but they weren't a simple language either. They followed mathematical progressions, but not in base 10 or base 16 or any of the common mathematical systems used by galactic civilizations. These were base 12, but with something added, something extra. What are these symbols here? Sarah pointed to recurring marks that seemed to interrupt the mathematical flow. Yuki zoomed in. That's what's weird. They don't fit any mathematical system. They're almost like emotional indicators, like ancient human emoji, but integrated into the math itself. Marcus leaned over the screen. You're saying this is math mixed with feelings? That's insane, came Kavith's voice from orbit. Mathematics is universal. It is pure logic. There is no room for emotion in numerical systems. Maybe not for you, Sarah said quietly. But humans use emotions in our thinking all the time. We make intuitive leaps. We feel when something is right before we can prove it. Our mathematics came from human minds, and human minds are messy. She looked back at the walls. The Vexari thought in pure crystal logic. The Mindari thought in unified telepathic consciousness. The Kelthusians thought in long, slow, careful analysis. None of them were messy. None of them mixed logic and emotion the way humans did. What if, Sarah said slowly, these markings were designed to be read by a species like us? A species that thinks in contradictions? The team worked through the night, Earth time. The dead planet's sun rose and set, but they barely noticed. Yuki's algorithms began finding patterns. Marcus started building a translation matrix. James's drones mapped thousands of square kilometers, finding similar markings everywhere they looked. On the third day, they had their first translation. Marcus stared at his screen, his hands shaking. Sarah, you need to see this. The team gathered around. The translation was rough, filled with gaps and uncertainties, but the message was clear enough to make them all fall silent. We failed. You will too, unless... The message cut off there. The rest was too damaged to read, or perhaps had never been finished. What does that mean? James asked. Sarah's mouth was dry. It means this wasn't random. It was a warning. Someone spent millions of years trying to warn us about something. Warn who? Yuki asked. They couldn't have known we'd exist. No, Marcus said, his linguist's mind working through the implications. But they knew someone would eventually. Some species that could read their message. They were writing to the future. Sarah touched her communicator. Dr. Kavith, we need to stop the demolition. This site is... Dr. Chen. Kavith's voice was patient but firm. We have heard many claims about these ruins over the centuries. Every new species that arrives thinks they have found something special. You have found nothing but your own pattern-seeking delusion. It is a known human tendency. You see faces in clouds and meaning in randomness. But the translation can be made to say anything if you want it badly enough. I'm sorry, Dr. Chen. You have 11 days remaining. Then the mining begins. The connection cut off. Sarah looked at her team. Marcus was already diving back into his translation work. Yuki was expanding her pattern analysis to the entire planetary scan. James was modifying his drones to collect even more data. We have 11 days, Sarah said, to prove that everyone in the galaxy is wrong. To decode a message that's been waiting for millions of years. To find out what they failed at and what they're warning us about. No pressure, James said, but he was smiling. That human smile that meant they were going to do the impossible or die trying. Sarah turned back to the markings. Somewhere in these millions of symbols was a message, a warning from a dead civilization to whoever came after. The galaxy's greatest minds had looked at these walls and seen nothing. But humans were different. Humans were messy. Humans saw patterns in chaos and meaning in noise. It drove the other species crazy. This human habit of believing in things before they could prove them. Maybe that was exactly what the ancient builders had counted on. Get to work, Sarah said. We've got a planet to save. She didn't know how right she was. In the darkness between stars, something ancient stirred. It had felt the touch of curious minds on old stones. It had noticed species gathering around ruins that should have remained buried. The silence was waking up, and it was hungry. The mining ships arrived on the 8th day. Sarah watched them through the observation window. Massive industrial vessels that could tear apart a planet in weeks. They moved into position around Terminus 7 like predators circling prey. Her team had 72 hours left. We're running out of time, Marcus said. He looked exhausted. They all did. None of them had slept more than a few hours since they arrived. The coffee supplies were running low, and James had started brewing something he called emergency fuel that was probably toxic to most galactic species. Sarah rubbed her eyes. What have we got? Yuki pulled up her latest findings on the main screen. The pattern is planet-wide. The markings aren't just in the ruins. They're everywhere. Underground on mountain faces and canyon walls. The entire surface of Terminus 7 is covered in these symbols. How is that possible? James asked. That would take millions of years. Billions of person-hours. Why would anyone do that? Because it's not separate messages, Marcus said, his voice rising with excitement despite his exhaustion. It's one message. One massive planet-wide message written over millions of years. Yuki, show them the three-dimensional model. The screen changed. James's drones had mapped everything, and Yuki's algorithms had processed it all. What appeared was breathtaking. The markings on Terminus 7 weren't random scratches on walls. They formed a three-dimensional puzzle that wrapped around the entire planet. When viewed from space with all the layers of meaning stacked on top of each other, they created something beautiful and terrible. It's a story, Sarah whispered. A history. No, a warning, Marcus nodded. I've been working on the translation. It's rough, but I'm getting pieces. They called themselves the Architects. They were the first, Sarah. The first spacefaring species in this galaxy. They existed 500 million years ago. The number was incomprehensible. 500 million years. When these beings were building starships, Earth's most advanced life forms were probably worms. What happened to them? James asked. That's the part we need more time to decode, Marcus said. But from what I can read, they didn't die out naturally. Something killed them. Something they woke up. Sarah felt cold. Show me everything you've translated. The fragments appeared on screen, pieces of a massive story told in mathematics and emotion. The Architects had been builders, explorers, scientists. They had spread across the galaxy, establishing civilizations on 1 million worlds. They had reached what they called the final plateau, a level of technology where they could manipulate matter and energy at will. They had built devices that could do anything, go anywhere, see everything, and then they had tried to see too much. They built something, Marcus said, pointing to a section of untranslated symbols, some kind of communication device. They wanted to talk to higher dimensions, to see what existed beyond normal space, and something answered. The silence, Sarah read from the translated text. They called it the silence because that's what happened to any civilization it touched. They just stopped. No war, no destruction, just silence, like they had never existed at all. Yuki was running calculations. If I'm reading this right, the silence is some kind of cosmic predator. It feeds on advanced civilizations. When a species reaches a certain level of development, it notices them. And then, silence, James finished. Sarah's hands were shaking. This couldn't be real. It was too much like a horror story, too convenient. But the evidence was all around them. An entire civilization had spent its final millions of years trying to warn the future about something that had destroyed them. Why leave a warning? She asked. If they were all dying, why spend so much effort on this? Marcus pulled up another section of translation. Because they figured out how to fight it. Too late for them, but maybe not too late for whoever came after. The warning is also a blueprint. Instructions for building a defense. Against what? James asked. How do you fight silence? I don't know yet, Marcus admitted. The translation is incomplete. We need more time. Sarah looked at the mining ships through the window. They would begin demolition in 3 days. Once they started tearing apart the planet for its minerals, all of this would be gone. The warning, the blueprint, the history of the galaxy's first civilization, all of it would be ground into industrial slag. She touched her communicator. Dr. Cavith, I need to speak to the council immediately. There was a long pause. Dr. Chen, we have been through this. You have found nothing that changes our assessment. We found proof of an extinct civilization that predates all known history. We've found evidence of a cosmic threat that destroyed them. And we've found what might be a defense against it. That changes everything. Another pause. Very well. The Council will hear you. But I warn you, they will not be sympathetic to human hysteria. The Council chamber was a virtual space, allowing representatives from a dozen species to meet without physical travel. Sarah stood in the center, her small hologram surrounded by massive presences, the Kelthusian Elder, the Vexari High Mathematician, the Mindari Collective, and others. They looked down at her like gods examining an insect. She presented everything. The translations, the patterns, the three-dimensional model of the planet-wide message. She showed them the warnings about the silence and the hints of a defense mechanism. She spoke for 2 hours, showing every piece of evidence her team had gathered. When she finished, there was silence, but not the cosmic horror kind. The uncomfortable kind that meant nobody was impressed. The Vexari High Mathematician spoke first, its voice like crystal bells. Dr. Chen, your pattern-matching algorithms are interesting, but they are based on human cognitive biases. You have found patterns because human brains are designed to find patterns. This does not make them real. But the translations can be interpreted many ways. The Mindari Collective interrupted. We have examined your data. The symbols you claim are warnings could just as easily be astronomical records or artistic expressions. You are seeing what you want to see. The Kelthusian Elder's ancient voice rumbled through the chamber. We have studied Terminus 7 for centuries. If there was a warning there, we would have found it. You humans have been in space for mere moments. Perhaps your enthusiasm exceeds your wisdom. Sarah felt her frustration rising. What about the mathematical patterns? The base 12 system with emotional indicators? Doesn't that suggest intentional communication? It suggests you have found a way to make random noise fit your expectations, the Vexari said. This is a known flaw in human cognition. You see faces in clouds, messages in static, meaning in chaos. Sometimes the chaos has meaning, Sarah shot back. Sometimes the pattern is real. And sometimes, the Mindari said gently, it is just a pattern. We are sorry, Dr. Chen. Your research is commendable, but it is not sufficient to halt a major mining operation. The minerals in Terminus 7 are needed for ship construction across the galaxy. We cannot delay progress for human imagination. The Council dismissed her. Sarah stood alone in the virtual chamber as the other presences winked out one by one. She had failed. In 72 hours, the mining would begin, and everything the architects had tried to preserve would be destroyed. Her team was waiting when she returned to the research station. They didn't need to ask how it went. They could see it on her face. They think we're crazy, she said. Well, James said, they're not entirely wrong. We are kinda crazy. We flew halfway across the galaxy to study ruins everyone else gave up on. We're seeing messages in rocks that might actually be just rocks. We're believing in cosmic horrors based on incomplete translations of extinct alien mathematics. So we give up? Marcus asked. Hell no, James said, grinning. Crazy is what humans do best. We just need to get crazier. He pulled up the scans of Terminus 7 on the main screen. I've been thinking, if the architects left a blueprint for a defense, it's got to be here somewhere. Not just in the translation, but in the structure itself. Maybe in the ruins or underground or everywhere, Yuki interrupted. She was staring at her screen with wide eyes. Oh my God. It's everywhere. The markings aren't just a message. They're also the mechanism. The entire planet is the defense system. Sarah rushed to look at Yuki's screen. The mathematician had been running quantum analysis on the crystalline structure of the rocks themselves. The markings weren't just carved into the surface. They went deep into the molecular structure of the stone, and they were active. It's storing energy, Yuki said. Quantum entropy, somehow captured and held in the crystal lattice. The markings act as a battery. 500 million years of decay, of probability fluctuations, all stored in these symbols. It's the most sophisticated data storage system I've ever seen. What kind of energy? Sarah asked. Uncertainty, Yuki said. Pure quantum uncertainty. And there's enough of it to power something massive. Marcus was already searching through his translations with new urgency. Uncertainty generators. That's what they called them. Devices that create quantum probability shields. They protect civilizations by making them uncertain, by keeping them in a state of superposition. The silence can't observe them because observation would collapse the wave function. That's insane, Sarah said. That's not how quantum mechanics works at a macro scale. Maybe it is, Yuki said. Maybe that's what the architects discovered. How to extend quantum uncertainty to massive scales. And maybe that's why they died. They became too certain, too perfect, too observable. James was working frantically at his terminal. If the planet is the battery, we need to find the trigger. The activation mechanism? It's got to be here somewhere. Alarms blared suddenly throughout the station. Sarah's communicator crackled to life. It was Keveth, and for the first time his crystalline voice sounded uncertain. Dr. Chen, you need to see this. The observation deck showed deep space in all directions. And in the distance, something was happening. Stars were going out, not dimming, not exploding, just disappearing. Entire star systems vanishing from sensors as if they had never existed. What is that? Sarah whispered. Keveth's voice was quiet. 12 star systems have gone silent in the last hour. No signals, no light, no gravitational signatures. They're just gone. And it's spreading, moving toward us at faster than light speeds. Sarah's blood went cold. She looked at her team. They were all thinking the same thing. The silence was coming, and they had 72 hours to figure out how to stop it. The Galactic Council met again 6 hours later. This time nobody was dismissing anyone. The emergency chamber was packed with representatives from every major civilization. Fear had a smell in space, Sarah thought. It smelled like ozone and desperation. 47 star systems, the Vexari High mathematician announced. Its crystalline voice trembled, something Sarah had never heard before. 47 systems gone silent in the last 6 hours. No distress calls, no explosions, no signatures of any kind. They simply ceased to exist. The Mindari Collective pulsed with visible distress. We tried to make telepathic contact with our colonies in the affected zones. There was nothing. Not death, not destruction. Just absence. As if those places had never been. Sarah stood before the council again. This time they were listening. The architects called it the silence, she said. It's been dormant for 500 million years. But something woke it up. Maybe our expansion into new space, maybe our technology reaching certain thresholds. The architects faced the same thing and they lost. But they left us a way to fight. These uncertainty generators you mentioned, the Kelthusian elder rumbled. Can they be built in time? I don't know, Sarah admitted. We've only translated a fraction of the markings. We need resources, we need experts from every field, and we need them now. You have them, Keveth said. He materialized beside Sarah, his crystalline form reflecting the chamber's light. The council grants you emergency authority. All resources of the galactic community are at your disposal. Tell us what you need, Sarah took a breath. This was it. Humanity's moment. They had been part of the galactic community for 200 years. Always the junior partners. Always the newcomers who didn't quite understand how things worked. Now the fate of the galaxy rested on human shoulders. I need artists, she said. The council stared at her. Artists, she repeated. Musicians, painters, poets, writers. The architects didn't think like any single galactic species. They thought in contradictions and emotions mixed with logic. To decode their message fully, we need people who understand that kind of thinking. Artists? The Vexari sounded confused. Art is entertainment, Dr. Chen. A pleasant diversion, but hardly relevant to science. That's where you're wrong, Sarah said firmly. Human art is how we explore impossible ideas, how we make intuitive leaps that logic can't reach. The architects left their message in a format that requires creative interpretation, not just analysis. They were writing to species like us, species that haven't abandoned the messy, contradictory, emotional way of thinking. The Mindari Collective pulsed thoughtfully. The human approach to problem-solving has always been unusual. Perhaps this is a situation where unusual is required. Agreed, the Kelthusian elder said. Dr. Chen, you will lead this project. Gather whoever you need. Humans, yes, but also any of our people who show aptitude for this, creative thinking. Over the next 24 hours, Terminus 7 transformed from a dead world scheduled for demolition into the center of the largest research project in galactic history. Ships arrived from every corner of known space. Scientists, engineers, mathematicians, and yes, artists. Thousands of them. Sarah stood in what was now being called the command center, a hastily assembled structure on the planet's surface. Holographic displays showed the ongoing translation project. Teams from a dozen species worked side by side, their different ways of thinking slowly meshing into something new. Marcus had assembled a linguistics team that included Vexari mathematicians, Mindari telepaths, and human poets. Together, they were translating the architect's message at incredible speed. What had taken 4 humans 2 weeks was now being done in hours. Yuki led the engineering team working on understanding the uncertainty generators. She had recruited every quantum physicist in the galaxy who was willing to throw out their textbooks and embrace the impossible. The devices described in the architect's blueprints shouldn't work according to known physics. But then again, the silence shouldn't exist either. James was coordinating construction. The humans had brought something the other species often mocked: improvisation. While the Vexari wanted perfect plans and the Kelthusians wanted centuries of testing, humans just built things and fixed them when they broke. James's engineering crews worked on timelines that made other species nervous, but they were getting results. "We've finished translating the architect's history," Marcus reported to Sarah. It's beautiful and terrible. They were like us, Sarah, not physically but mentally. They thought in poetry and mathematics. They built temples that were also computers. They saw the universe as both logical and magical. "What happened to them?" Sarah asked. Marcus pulled up a holographic display showing the translation. They reached what they called the final understanding, a point where their technology was so advanced, their knowledge so complete, that they could predict everything, every particle, every thought, every outcome. They became certain. "And the silence noticed them," Sarah said. "Not exactly. The silence is observation itself in a way. It's a cosmic force that collapses probability waves. When a civilization becomes too certain, too predictable, too perfect, they become observable. An observation by the silence means they cease to exist as a possibility," Yuki said, joining them. She looked exhausted but excited. "I think I understand now. The silence doesn't destroy civilizations. It simply observes them into non-existence. Quantum mechanics at a cosmic scale. When you observe a particle, you collapse its wave function into one state. The silence does that to entire civilizations. It observes them, and they collapse from probability into impossibility." Sarah's head hurt thinking about it. "So the architect's defense makes civilizations unobservable," Yuki finished. "The uncertainty generators create a field where multiple realities exist simultaneously. Inside the field, you both exist and don't exist. You're both here and not here. The silence can't observe you because you're in superposition. You're uncertain. That's why the message was so hard to read," Marcus added. "The architects designed it to be uncertain, to require creative interpretation, because only a species that still embraced uncertainty could decode it and use it. And species like the Vexari, who value perfect logic?" Sarah asked. "They would have eventually become certain," Yuki said sadly. "Too predictable. Too observable. The Mindari, too. Once their collective consciousness reached perfect unity. Even the Kelthusians, once their long lives gave them complete understanding. Every galactic species was heading towards certainty. Except humans," James said, walking up with a tablet full of engineering diagrams. "We're too messy. We never reach consensus. We're always arguing, always uncertain, always changing our minds. It drives other species crazy. It also might save them," Sarah said. "What's the status on the uncertainty generator?" James's grin was wild. "We've got a problem. A big one. The device needs a power source beyond anything we've got. We're talking about quantum entropy on a massive scale. The kind of energy that builds up over millions of years." "The planet," Sarah said suddenly. Yuki said the markings store quantum energy. "The entire planet is the power source." "Exactly," Yuki confirmed. "Every marking, every symbol carved into Terminus 7 over 500 million years, stores quantum uncertainty. The architects turned their entire world into a battery. It's genius. But there's a catch," James said. "To activate it, someone has to read the planet. Not with instruments, not with analysis. Really read it. Understand it. Believe in it. The activation requires a conscious observer who can hold the entire contradictory mess in their mind at once." "That's impossible," Kavith said. He had joined the group, along with several other council members. "No single mind can comprehend that much information. The data from an entire planet's worth of quantum states would overwhelm any consciousness." "Maybe," Sarah said. "But human minds are weird. We dream, we imagine, we hold impossible contradictions in our thoughts all the time. We believe in things we can't prove. We see patterns that shouldn't exist and make them real by believing in them. She looked at her team. Marcus, who could read poetry and mathematics. Yuki, who saw beauty in quantum uncertainty. James, who built impossible things because he didn't know they were impossible. "I'll do it," Sarah said. "I'll read the planet." "Dr. Chen," the Kelthusian elder said gently, "this could destroy your mind. The human brain was not designed for this kind of input." "The human brain wasn't designed for a lot of things," Sarah said. "We went to space in metal cans held together with hope and duct tape. We shouldn't be here at all, talking to aliens, planning to fight a cosmic horror. But here we are. Being impossible is kind of our thing." The Mindari collective pulsed with concern. "If you fail, we all fail. The silence is only 12 hours away now. It has consumed over 100 star systems." "Then we'd better not fail," Sarah said. Over the next 6 hours, they prepared. Yuki designed an interface that would let Sarah connect to the planet's quantum matrix. Marcus compiled the complete translation. Every symbol, every layer of meaning. James built a stabilization field to keep Sarah's consciousness from fragmenting under the load. Sarah sat in the center of the temple complex where this had all started. Around her, millions of beings watched through holocasts. Humans, Vixari, Mindari, Kelthusians, and dozens of other species. All of them waiting to see if one human could do the impossible. "Ready?" Yuki asked. Sarah took a breath. "No, but let's do it anyway." The interface activated. Sarah's mind touched the planet, and suddenly she was everywhere. She was in every symbol, every marking, every quantum state stored in the ancient stones. 500 million years of information flooded into her consciousness. It should have destroyed her. It should have shattered her mind into fragments. But human brains were strange things. They dreamed impossible dreams every night. They held contradictory beliefs without breaking. They saw patterns in chaos and meaning in noise. Sarah read the planet like a story. She saw the architects in their glory, building wonders across the galaxy. She felt their pride as they reached toward perfect knowledge. She experienced their horror as the silence came for them. She lived through their desperate last million years, carving warnings into their own world, hoping someone would understand. And she understood. The uncertainty generator wasn't just a device. It was a philosophy, a way of being. The architects had learned too late that certainty was death, that perfection was extinction, that the only way to survive in a quantum universe was to remain uncertain, contradictory, impossible. They had failed because they became certain, but they left instructions for those who stayed messy. Sarah opened her eyes. She was back in her body but changed. She could still feel the planet's quantum matrix humming in her mind. She knew how to activate the defense. She understood what needed to be done. "It works," she said. Her voice echoed across the galaxy through a billion holocasts. "The defense works, but we need to expand it. Terminus 7 is just the prototype. We need to build uncertainty generators around every inhabited world in the galaxy." "In 12 hours?" Kaveth asked. "Impossible," Sarah smiled. That human smile that meant they were about to do something ridiculous. "You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Get me every ship, every engineer, every artist in the galaxy. We're going to build the impossible, together." The silence was coming, but for the first time in 500 million years, someone was ready to fight back. The galaxy had never moved so fast. Within an hour of Sarah's announcement, ships began arriving at Terminus 7 by the thousands. Not just military vessels or research ships, but cargo haulers, passenger liners, even private yachts. Everyone who could contribute was coming. Sarah stood in the expanded command center, now a massive structure that covered half a square kilometer. Holographic displays showed the galaxy in real time. The silence was a spreading darkness on the map, consuming everything in its path. It had taken 160 star systems now. At its current speed, it would reach the core worlds in 8 hours. They had 8 hours to save the galaxy. "We can't build physical generators around every world," Yuki said, her fingers flying across multiple screens at once. "There's not enough time, not enough materials. We need to be smarter." "The architect's blueprints show a network," Marcus added. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, probably because he hadn't. "If we build generators at key points, they can create a web of uncertainty that covers the entire galaxy." "Like a net. How many key points?" Sarah asked. 12,000, Yuki said. "Give or take." James laughed, but it was the slightly hysterical laugh of someone who had gone beyond exhaustion into a weird state of hyperactive clarity. 12,000 uncertainty generators. In 8 hours, sure, why not? While we're at it, let's juggle black holes and teach the Vexari to dance. Can it be done? Sarah asked seriously. James stopped laughing and looked at his screens. He was coordinating construction teams from 50 different species, each with their own methods and technologies. It was chaos. Beautiful, productive chaos, maybe, he said. If we cut every corner, skip every safety protocol, and get very lucky. We need to mass-produce the generators. The Vexari have industrial fabricators that can print complex technology. The Kelthusians have raw materials stored from centuries of mining. The Mindari can coordinate the construction telepathically. And humans? Keveth asked. He had become Sarah's shadow over the past day, learning to see the galaxy through human eyes. Humans will hold it all together, James said. We're good at managing chaos. While everyone else follows their protocols and procedures, we'll be the glue that makes this mess actually work. Sarah looked at the map again. 8 hours. 12,000 generators. It was impossible by any rational calculation. But humans had a long history of doing impossible things when they were scared enough or crazy enough, and right now the galaxy was both. Make it happen, she said. The next 6 hours were a blur of coordinated insanity. On Terminus 7, massive industrial fabricators began printing uncertainty generator cores based on the architect's designs. They were beautiful things, crystalline structures that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. Each one contained quantum circuits that shouldn't exist according to normal physics. But the architects had never cared much for normal physics. Around the galaxy, construction teams worked at speeds that terrified safety inspectors. Vexari precision met human improvisation. Kelthusian experience combined with Mindari coordination. Every species contributed their strengths, and somehow, impossibly, it started working. Sarah barely left the command center. She was the nexus point, the one who had read the planet and understood the full scope of what they were building. Other people could construct the devices, but she had to guide them. Had to make sure each generator aligned with the others, creating the quantum network that would protect them all. Generator Site 743 is having issues, a Vexari engineer reported. The quantum alignment is off by 0.03 degrees. Within tolerance, but not optimal. Leave it, Sarah said, making a decision that would have horrified her 2 weeks ago. We don't have time for optimal. We need functional. But the calculations suggest the calculations are based on certainty, Sarah interrupted gently. We're building uncertainty generators. They don't need to be perfect. They need to be uncertain. Trust me. The Vexari hesitated, then nodded. It was hard for a species that valued precision to accept good enough. But they were learning. Problems emerged constantly. A generator on the Kelthusian homeworld refused to activate. The quantum entanglement between two distant sites kept collapsing. A construction team in the Andromeda sector ran out of exotic materials needed for the cores. Every problem was solved with a combination of science, creativity, and what James called aggressive optimism. When they ran out of materials, they synthesized new ones that were close enough. When entanglement failed, they used human intuition to adjust the frequencies until it worked. When a generator wouldn't activate, they sent an artist to look at it. The artist suggested moving it 3 meters to the left because it felt wrong where it was. They moved it, and it worked. The other species were learning that human methods, while terrifying, got results. 5 hours in, disaster struck. A key generator site in the galactic core experienced a complete failure. The quantum matrix collapsed, and the massive energy release destroyed the entire construction platform. 12,000 workers evacuated, but the generator was gone. And without it, the network would have a fatal gap right in the center of the galaxy. We can't rebuild it in time, Yuki said, her voice hollow. That site took 3 hours to construct. We have less than 3 hours until the silence arrives. Sarah stared at the map. The failed site glowed red in the center of the galaxy. Everything else was green, ready to activate. But one missing link would break the entire chain. The network needed all 12,000 generators to function. What if we don't replace it? Marcus said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. The network is supposed to create uncertainty, he continued, his linguist's mind seeing patterns in language that others missed. But we're building it perfectly. Every generator in its precise location, creating a precise field. That's certainty, not uncertainty. What are you suggesting? Sarah asked. Leave the gap, Marcus said. Let the network be imperfect, uncertain. The architect's message said that certainty is death. Maybe our attempt to build a perfect defense is the problem. Maybe we need to embrace the flaw. That's insane, the Vixari engineer protested. The calculations clearly show we need complete coverage. The calculations assume a deterministic universe, Yuki said slowly. Her eyes were wide. But quantum mechanics is probabilistic. Marcus is right. A perfect network would be observable, predictable, certain, but a flawed network, one with a gap that shouldn't work but does. That's uncertain, Sarah finished. That's human thinking. Build something that shouldn't work and make it work anyway through sheer belief. You cannot base galactic defense on belief, Keveth said. Why not? Sarah asked. The architects did. They believed future species would find their message. They believed someone would understand. They believed in the possibility of survival even as they died. Belief in the impossible is the most uncertain thing there is. She looked at the map. 2 hours and 45 minutes until the silence arrived. 11,999 generators ready. One gap that logic said would doom them all. Leave the gap, Sarah decided. Focus all resources on activating the existing network. We'll make it work. How? Kaveth asked. Sarah smiled. Very carefully and with a lot of hope. The next 2 hours were spent finalizing the network. Each generator was tested, aligned, and prepared. The quantum entanglement linking them all together was fragile, held together by physics that existed in the gap between possible and impossible. Sarah stood at the primary control center on Terminus 7. Around her, representatives from every major species waited. The galaxy held its breath. On billions of worlds, people looked up at the sky, waiting to see if they would continue to exist. The silence was at the border now. Sensors showed it as a wave of collapsed probability, spreading through space at impossible speeds. Every star system it touched simply stopped being. Not destroyed, not conquered, just erased from possibility. All generators ready, Yuki reported. Network synchronization at 97%. That's as good as it's going to get with the missing node. It'll have to be enough, Sarah said. Activate the network. Yuki's hand hesitated over the control. Sarah, if this doesn't work, then we tried, Sarah said simply. And trying is more than the universe expected from anyone. Do it. Yuki activated the network. Across the galaxy, 12,000 uncertainty generators came online simultaneously. Quantum fields bloomed around inhabited worlds, creating zones where reality became flexible. Probability waves spread through space, making everything inside them uncertain. Ships both existed and didn't exist. Planets were both here and somewhere else. Life was both present and absent. The effect was disorienting. Sarah felt herself become uncertain, her consciousness existing in multiple states at once. She was in the command center. She was on Earth. She was everywhere and nowhere. The sensation should have been terrifying, but instead it felt like waking up from a dream. Like reality had always been this flexible, and they'd just been pretending it was solid. The silence reached the edge of the network. Sarah watched on sensors as the wave of collapsed probability met the field of uncertainty. For a moment, nothing happened. The two forces existed in the same space without interacting, like two people passing in a crowd. Then the silence began to change. What's happening? James asked. Yuki stared at her readings. The silence is trying to observe us to collapse our probability wave. But it can't. We're too uncertain. Every time it tries to observe us in one state, we're also in another state. It can't collapse something that refuses to be certain. Is it working? Kaveth asked. Are we safe? I don't know, Sarah admitted. And that's exactly the point. We're uncertain. That's the defense. We exist in a state where we're both safe and not safe, both here and not here. The silence can't erase us because it can't define us. The silence continued to spread through the galaxy, but now it flowed around the uncertainty fields like water around stones. It couldn't touch the protected worlds. They were too indefinite, too contradictory, too impossible to observe. But there was still the gap. The missing generator in the galactic core. As the silence spread, it found that weakness. Sarah watched as the wave converged on the unprotected space, gathering like a storm about to break. It found the gap, Marcus said. What do we do? Sarah took a breath. This was it. The moment where human thinking either saved them or doomed them. We do nothing, we wait, we believe. Believe in what? Kaveth asked. In the impossible, Sarah said. In the idea that a broken defense can work better than a perfect one. In the chance that uncertainty is stronger than we think. The silence poured through the gap, a wave of observation that should have collapsed the entire network. It should have found the weakness and exploited it, erasing the galaxy one world at a time. Instead, something impossible happened. The gap held, not because it was strong, but because it was uncertain. The silence tried to observe the unprotected space, but the space refused to be certain about whether it was protected or not. The nearby generators created enough quantum uncertainty that even the gap existed in superposition, protected and unprotected simultaneously. The silence paused, confused by the contradiction. And in that pause, Sarah understood what the architects had really discovered. Certainty was death because certainty could be observed. But uncertainty was life because uncertainty could not be fully known. The more imperfect their defense, the harder it was to observe, the more uncertain it became. The gap wasn't a weakness. It was their greatest strength. The silence withdrew, unable to process the contradiction. It retreated from the galaxy, seeking easier prey in the dark spaces between stars. The protected worlds remained uncertain, flickering between states, alive in the way that quantum particles are alive. Always possible, never definite. The galaxy had survived. Sarah collapsed into her chair, exhausted beyond measure. Around her, the command center erupted in celebration. Species that had never shown emotion were cheering, crying, expressing relief in 1,000 different ways. Kaveth approached her, his crystalline form shimmering with something that might have been joy. "You did it, Dr. Chen. You saved us all." "We did it," Sarah corrected. "Humans, Vexari, Mindari, Kelthusians, everyone. We did it by learning to think like each other, by embracing uncertainty together." "I thought your plan was insane," Kaveth admitted. "Leaving the gap, trusting in belief, building something that shouldn't work." "Welcome to human thinking," Sarah said with a tired smile. "We specialize in impossible things." But even as she celebrated, Sarah knew this was just the beginning. The silence was still out there waiting, and there were questions left unanswered. Why had it returned now? What had awakened it? And were there other threats the architects had warned about, hidden in markings they hadn't yet decoded? The galaxy was safe for now, but uncertain times lay ahead, which, Sarah reflected, was exactly how humans liked it. The silence returned 3 days later. Sarah was in the restored temple on Terminus 7, studying newly decoded sections of the architect's message when the alarm sounded. She ran to the command center, her heart pounding. The uncertainty network had held for 3 days. 3 days of hope, of believing they had won. But the silence was gathering again at the edge of the network, and this time it wasn't retreating. "What's different?" she demanded as she burst into the command center. Yuki pulled up sensor data. "It's adapting. Learning." The first time it encountered our uncertainty fields, it was confused. "But it's been studying us. Look at the pattern." The displays showed the silence probing the network like a predator testing a fence. It would touch the uncertainty fields, withdraw, touch them again from a different angle. It was experimenting. "How long until it finds a way through?" Marcus asked. "Hours," Yuki said grimly. "Maybe less. It's learning faster than we can adapt." Sarah felt the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders again. They had bought 3 days, but the silence was patient. It had existed for billions of years. It could afford to take its time learning how to erase them. "We need to do more than defend," Sarah said suddenly. "We need to communicate with it." The command center fell silent. Everyone stared at her. "Communicate?" Kaveth said carefully. "Dr. Chen, the silence is not a species. It is a cosmic force. You cannot negotiate with entropy or make treaties with gravity." "The architects tried to communicate with it," Marcus said, pulling up translations. "In their final days, they attempted to make contact. They failed, but they left records of their attempts." "What did they learn?" Sarah asked. Marcus scrolled through dense text, his eyes scanning rapidly. "They learned that the silence is not mindless. It's not just a natural phenomenon. It has purpose. It seeks out civilizations that reach a certain threshold and eliminates them. They called it a cosmic immune system." "An immune system," Sarah repeated. "Something that protects the universe from threats." "What were they protecting against?" "Certainty," Yuki said, her eyes widening. "Perfect knowledge. When a civilization becomes so advanced that they can predict and control everything, they become a threat to the quantum nature of reality itself. The silence eliminates them to preserve uncertainty in the universe. Sarah felt pieces clicking together in her mind. So we're not fighting an enemy. We're dealing with something that thinks we're a disease. A disease that has learned to resist treatment, James added. Our uncertainty fields make us look like we're still evolving, still uncertain. But if the silence figures out we're faking it, we need to talk to it, Sarah said firmly. Really talk to it. Make it understand that we don't want to become certain, that we choose uncertainty. How do you talk to something that erases you when it observes you? Kaveth asked. Sarah looked at Marcus. You're a linguist. The architects left notes on their communication attempts. What did they try? Marcus pulled up more files. They tried mathematics, which makes sense. Math is universal, but the silence didn't respond. They tried physics, showing they understood the laws of the universe. No response. They tried everything based on certainty on things that could be proven. What didn't they try? Sarah asked. Stories, Marcus said slowly. Art, poetry, things that have meaning without being provable. Things that are uncertain by nature. Sarah felt it click. The architects failed because they were trying to communicate using the very thing the silence feared. Certainty, provable truths. But if we communicate using uncertainty, it might listen, Marcus finished. This is insane, the Vexari engineer said. Not Kaveth, but another one who had joined the team. You want to transmit poetry at a cosmic horror? Yes, Sarah said simply, because certainty failed. Let's try uncertainty. Over the next hour they prepared. Marcus assembled a team of linguists, artists, and philosophers from across the galaxy. They crafted a message that was deliberately uncertain, not a mathematical proof but a story, not facts but feelings, not certainty but hope. Sarah herself wrote the core of it, a message from humanity to the silence, expressing what they had learned from the architects, that perfection was death, that certainty was stagnation, that the beauty of the universe lay in its uncertainty, its probability, its endless possibility. How do we transmit it? James asked. Through the network, Yuki said. The uncertainty generators are quantum devices. They exist in superposition with the silence already. We can use them to send the message directly into whatever the silence uses as consciousness. If it has consciousness, Kaveth pointed out. Only one way to find out, Sarah said. They transmitted the message. It was nothing like the mathematical communications the architects had tried. It was a poem written in quantum states. A story told through probability waves, an expression of hope encoded in uncertainty itself, and the silence responded, not with words or mathematics, with sensation. Sarah felt it directly, a presence so vast it made her mind ache. The silence was aware. It had always been aware. It had seen civilizations rise and fall for billions of years. It had watched species reach for the stars and then reach too far, becoming so certain of their understanding that they threatened the fundamental uncertainty of existence. It showed her what happened when certainty won. Universes collapsing into single points of absolute knowledge, reality itself becoming deterministic, predictable, dead. The silence existed to prevent that, to preserve the quantum nature of existence, to keep the universe uncertain and therefore alive, but it also showed her something the architects had never understood. The silence was lonely. It had eliminated countless civilizations, always doing what it believed necessary to protect existence itself. But it had never found anyone who understood, who chose uncertainty willingly, who saw beauty in probability rather than fear and chaos, until now. Sarah opened her eyes. She was back in her body, but she could still feel the silence's presence. It was waiting, testing, hoping. It wants to know if we're serious, she said. If we really choose uncertainty or if we're just hiding until we can become certain again. How do we prove that? Kaveth asked. Sarah looked at the uncertainty network displayed on the screens. 12,000 generators protecting the galaxy, a perfect defense growing more stable every hour. They had been working to strengthen it, to remove flaws, to make it certain. We have to make a choice, she said. We can keep improving the network, making it stronger and more predictable. Eventually, we'll have perfect protection, perfect certainty, and the silence will eliminate us. Or, James asked, though he already knew, or we embrace uncertainty permanently. We redesign galactic civilization around it. We stop seeking perfect knowledge and perfect control. We accept that we'll always be a little bit uncertain, a little bit chaotic, a little bit impossible. That would change everything, the Mindari Collective said. Its telepathic voice carried concern. Our civilization is built on achieving collective certainty. The Vexari pursue perfect mathematics. The Kelthusians seek complete understanding through long experience. You are asking us to abandon our greatest achievements. No, Sarah said. I'm asking you to redefine achievement. The architects were the most advanced civilization in galactic history, and certainty killed them. Maybe advancement isn't about knowing everything. Maybe it's about staying curious forever. There was a long silence in the command center. Representatives from every species considered what Sarah was proposing. A permanent revolution in how they understood progress and civilization. It was terrifying. It was uncertain. It was also the only way to survive. I accept, Kaveth said suddenly. His crystalline form shimmered with what Sarah had learned to recognize as determination. My people value perfect mathematics, but mathematics is beautiful precisely because it contains infinities we can never fully grasp. We can pursue understanding without claiming perfect certainty. The Mindari will adapt, the collective agreed. We sought perfect unity of minds, but we can maintain connection while preserving individual uncertainty. We can be together and separate simultaneously. One by one, the other species agreed. It wasn't easy. It went against millions of years of cultural evolution. But the alternative was extinction. Sarah prepared a second message to the silence. Not a plea, but a promise. The galactic civilizations would choose uncertainty. They would modify the uncertainty network not to grow stronger, but to stay beautifully imperfect. They would restructure their societies to preserve curiosity, creativity, and the messy contradictions that made life worth living. They would stay uncertain, forever. The message was sent through the quantum network, and the silence responded with something that might have been approval, or might have been relief, or might have been hope. The presence withdrew slightly, no longer pressing against the network with hostile intent. It was still there watching. It would always be watching, ready to eliminate any civilization that became too certain. But it was no longer their enemy. It was their reminder, their guardian, the thing that would ensure they never stopped being beautifully, impossibly uncertain. What happens now? Marcus asked. Sarah looked at Terminus 7 through the command center windows. The ancient markings still covered every surface, still held their quantum secrets. They had decoded enough to save the galaxy, but vast sections remained untranslated, mysteries waiting to be explored by future generations. Now we learn to live with uncertainty, she said. We redesign our civilizations. We teach our children that not knowing is okay, that being wrong sometimes is part of being alive, that the universe is more wonderful when it surprises us. The Council will need to reform, Kaveth said. Create new structures that embrace uncertainty rather than seeking to eliminate it. Humans should help with that, the Kelthusian elder said. You have experience with chaotic governance. Your democracies are messy, contradictory, constantly changing. We thought that made you weak. Now we see it may have kept you safe. Sarah smiled. Democracy is pretty uncertain. Nobody's ever sure how elections will turn out. We argue constantly about what's right. Our leaders change every few years. It drives us crazy sometimes. But it keeps you from becoming certain, the Mindari observed. Exactly, Sarah said. Over the following weeks, the galaxy transformed. The uncertainty network wasn't strengthened but diversified, made deliberately imperfect. Each generator was modified to include random fluctuations, creative variations, beautiful flaws. The network became less like a machine and more like a living thing, constantly changing, never quite predictable. The Galactic Council reformed with human principles of productive chaos. Instead of seeking consensus, they encouraged debate. Instead of long-term planning, they embraced flexible adaptation. Instead of perfecting their civilizations, they celebrated the messy work of constant improvement. Scientists across the galaxy changed how they worked. Instead of seeking final answers, they pursued better questions. Instead of claiming certainty, they expressed confidence levels and admitted uncertainty. The phrase, "I don't know, but let's find out," became honored across 1,000 worlds. Artists became as valued as engineers. Poets worked alongside physicists. Musicians consulted on starship designs because their creative uncertainty helped avoid the trap of rigid thinking. The galaxy became messier, more chaotic, more human, and it thrived. Sarah stood in the temple on Terminus 7 one last time before returning to Earth. The markings covered the walls, beautiful and mysterious. They had decoded enough to survive, but vast secrets remained. Her children's children would still be studying these walls, still finding new meanings, still being surprised. Marcus joined her. The translation teams found something new yesterday. A message we hadn't seen before. It was hidden in layers of other text, only visible when you stopped looking for it directly. What did it say? Sarah asked. Marcus pulled up his data pad, but he didn't need to. He had memorized the words. We failed because we became certain. You succeeded because you stayed curious. Stay messy. Stay human. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. They knew. Even 500 million years ago, dying while trying to save the future, they knew that being messy was the answer. Being human, Marcus corrected gently. But I think in galactic terms now, human means something bigger. It means choosing uncertainty, embracing chaos, finding beauty in contradictions. The ultimate compliment, Sarah said, smiling. Every species trying to be more human. They left the temple and walked back to the landing pad where Sarah's ship waited. Behind them, Terminus 7 stood unchanged, its ancient markings holding secrets they would spend lifetimes exploring. The planet had become a pilgrimage site, a place where beings from across the galaxy came to remember that uncertainty was strength and chaos was life. As Sarah's ship lifted off, she looked down at the gray world one last time. They had called the markings meaningless. Every advanced species in the galaxy had examined them and found nothing but random scratches. Until humans arrived. Until messy, contradictory, impossible humans looked at the same evidence and saw a message, saw hope, saw a warning and a defense and a philosophy of survival, written in the language of uncertainty itself. The truth had been hidden in plain sight for 500 million years, hidden from species that sought certainty, hidden from minds that valued perfection, hidden from civilizations that had forgotten how to be uncertain, until humans found it. Sarah leaned back in her seat and smiled. The universe was vast and strange and full of mysteries they would never fully solve. Cosmic horrors lurked in the darkness, ready to eliminate species that became too certain of their knowledge. The silence watched constantly, guardian of uncertainty, protector of probability, and humanity, along with every other species in the galaxy, would spend the rest of existence being beautifully, impossibly, perfectly uncertain, never knowing everything, never reaching final answers, never becoming so advanced that they forgot how to be surprised. They had been saved by their flaws, by their chaos, by their messy, contradictory, emotional, creative, impossible way of thinking that had driven other species crazy for 2 centuries. The galaxy had called humanity irrational, impulsive, chaotic, and contradictory. They were right, and that's exactly what saved everyone. Sarah closed her eyes and dreamed of the future, an uncertain future full of possibilities, a quantum future where every path remained open and every outcome stayed probable, a future where the greatest achievement wasn't perfect knowledge but perfect curiosity, a future that was, in the best possible way, perfectly human. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the silence watched and waited, not as an enemy now but as a reminder, a guardian ensuring that the civilizations it had once hunted would never forget the lesson the architects had learned too late. Certainty is death. Uncertainty is life. Stay messy. Stay curious. Stay human forever.